What's up, guys? I hope everybody's having an incredible day. We are going to get started here in about 5 minutes. We're going to let a bunch of people hop on, and then we're going to get started with our Bible study. Just as an FYI, if you're new here, we do this every single Tuesday at 7 o'clock live. So we're going to wait till 5 or 10 people hop on. It's probably going to take, usually about 5 minutes or so for everybody to hop on. Usually we have about 10 people or so. So we're going to get started here in about 5 minutes. I hope everybody is incredible. I hope your day is going well. I have had a relatively rough weekend. I've been kind of sick, but thank the Lord, I'm feeling a little bit better now. I'm going to try to make tonight's message on the shorter side because of my voice, but we are going to do our best. I'm super excited about tonight's topic. God started putting some stuff on my heart this morning to talk about Exodus and Moses bringing the children of Israel out of bondage. And not only that, but just kind of the start to Moses' journey and how all of that kind of led up. So we're going to get started here in about 5 minutes. Y'all just forgive me for my voice. I had, like I said, a relatively rough weekend. I was pretty sick, so we're going to see how long my voice is going to last. So yeah, we'll get started here in maybe 5 minutes. So love you guys. If you're just hopping on and you're new, hey Teresa, how are you? Hey Rose, how are you? If you're just hopping on, we do this every single Tuesday night. Typically starts at about 7 o'clock. And so we do it every single Tuesday night. Typically starts at 7 o'clock. But being that all the restaurants and everything are shut down right now, we can't really meet in person. So we have swapped everything to online. So we're going to get started here in maybe 2-3 minutes. We usually have about 10-15 people hop on. Super excited about tonight's message. God started talking to me this morning about talking about Moses and the people of Israel and going into a little bit more in depth of the processes that led up to them being delivered. I know in the past, over the last few weeks, we've talked about Joshua and Caleb and after they got delivered. And what we're going to do is we're going to talk about kind of the start of where it all began. From him being put in a river as a baby. So super excited about it. We're going to get started here in about another maybe minute and a half, 2 minutes. Usually get about 10 people hopping on. So y'all forgive me, by the way, my voice, like I said, I've been sick over the weekend, so my voice is kind of weird. So if I have to blow my nose or take a sip of water or whatever, just forgive me. Because my voice has had it. It has definitely had it for sure. Oh, but I hope everybody's doing really well. Hope everybody's doing incredibly well. I'm going to grab a water, and then we're going to get started. All right. Oh, let's go for it. So what we're going to do is, if y'all wouldn't mind praying with me, we're going to start with a quick prayer, and let's go right into it. Lord, I pray that you guide us. I pray you'd strengthen us, God. Lord, I pray each and every one of us is praying on our own. Lord, I pray you continue to watch over us, God. I pray you would anoint me to teach this message, and I pray you would open our ears and open our hearts and guide us in every single aspect, God, that you want us to. Lord, I pray you would remove a reprobate mind if that's what's going on in our personal lives. Lord, I pray that we would find a new self-commitment and a new understanding of you through this, God. Lord, and I rebuke and bind sickness. I rebuke and bind any sort of illness, God. I rebuke and bind depression. I rebuke and bind suicide. I rebuke and bind anxiety. I rebuke and bind all of it. Lord, I loose your spirit of healing. And God, I pray that I plead the blood of Jesus over this building and over each and every one of our minds. And God, I pray you would just strengthen us. I pray you just guide us in Jesus' name. Amen. All right, so let's go for it. Let's talk. Today, we're going to be talking about Moses. We're going to be talking about how Moses was as a kid from what we know of, how he grew up. We're also going to be talking about where kind of the points leading up to the plagues. Now, we're probably going to stop right around the plagues because there's so much in the plagues that you can literally talk 10 lessons on the plagues. But we're just kind of going to go over a brief overview today. So just to kind of give you, to set the tone, if you know anything about the Israelites, if you know anything about Israel, Israel is used to going into bondage. It's just one of those things where Israel just constantly has this issue of following after God and then going back to worshiping a false God, right? And I think that lots of us as people sometimes, we can do that. What we do is we don't see God working in the background all the time. So lots of times it's our natural instinct to try to make moves for God, when lots of times we need to wait on God rather than making moves for Him. I don't know about you guys, but I've jumped the gun on plenty of things that God could have taken care of in the past that I got myself in more trouble jumping the gun than just waiting on God if I'd have been patient. I don't think patience is one of our natural, really, I don't know, at least for me, patience is a tad bit tough sometimes. So let's read Exodus chapter 1, verse 7 through 8. And it says, and the children of Israel were fruitful and increased abundantly, and multiplied, and waxed exceedingly mighty, and the land was filled with them. Now there arose a new king over Egypt, which knew not Joseph. So this new king, right, he was a harsh guy. It says that he set harsh taskmasters over the Israelites and sent them into hard labor. He sent them into the fields and constructing cities and walls. And if you kind of look into it, if you kind of continue to look into it, you realize that even though they were in bondage, even though they had a harsh ruler, they still continued to multiply. Not only did they still continue to multiply, but they still continued to somewhat hold on to a remnant of their faith. And if you actually read in 1 Corinthians 10, chapter 10, verse 1 through 11, it kind of teaches that we can use the flight from Egypt as an example for us today when it comes to what we'll talk about here in a minute. So I want to point out that these people, even though they're in bondage, they were set to be in bondage, and technically they may be doing everything right, and how would I say this the right way? You can be doing everything right in your walk with God and still get attacked, right? Just because you're in a walk with God, it does not mean you're immune to attacks. It does not mean you're immune to issues. It does not mean you're immune to problems. But what it does mean is that you have a God at your back, whereas used to, you just had circumstance at your back, which was left up to chance. So let's keep going. Let's talk about the birth of Moses and what kind of grew into this. So Satan, he fears the people of God because the reality of it is we have the power. And he knows it. You know what's interesting is that the Bible refers to him as a roaring lion, seeking whom he may devour. Now, if you know anything about what a roaring lion is, lions only get louder and more obnoxious as they get older and more decrepit. So in reality, whenever it refers to Satan as a roaring lion, seeking whom he may devour, what God is really saying is Satan is so old, so broken, so decrepit that all he can do is talk. That is it. That's all he can do. And see, we choose as people whether what voice we hear. Do we believe the promises that God gives us, or do we listen to the old, loud, decrepit lion? All he can do is whisper in your ear. That's all he can do. That's why Paul says you have to take every thought into captivity, every single thought. One of my favorite quotes, and this is something that was on my screensaver for a long time, is sow a bad thought, reap a bad action. Sow a bad action, reap a bad habit. Sow a bad habit, reap a bad character. Sow a bad character, reap a bad destiny. Every single thing you do, I know I've said this before, whether subconsciously or consciously, starts with your thought, which means that it is so important that we listen to the right voices. It is so important that we listen to the music that elevates God. It is so important that the things that we see and the things that we watch and the things that we set our minds to elevate God. Because here's the thing. You'll notice that your mood on a daily basis, if it is constantly filtered by the world, TV, the media sucks. Just in general, when I say the media, I'm talking about TV in general. I mean, it's most of the time it's either a time waster or you just have the same. I mean, the news is basically like like a soap opera almost. It really, really has become this just soap opera of bad news. And, you know, we complain about the virus and we complain about all these other things, but one thing I want to point out is if it's caused any fear in your life, I want you to ask yourself this question, is have I even prayed or picked up the Bible during this pandemic started? Or have I just been watching what the media says and been watching what they've been doing and creating my opinions based off of you know, what I am seeing rather than looking to the Word and getting hope from God. So let's keep on going. So in Exodus 1:17, it says, "But the midwives feared God and did not as Egypt commanded, but saved the men and children alive." So basically, Pharaoh became fearful that the Hebrews would rise up and overthrow the Egyptians. And the reason why Pharaoh became fearful was because, number one, you got to realize that they are multiplying by the millions, and they're being ruled by the Egyptians. Right? There's no ratio that the Bible talks about, but there are a lot more Hebrews and see, this is another thing with our walk with God. We've got to understand there were a lot more Hebrews than there were Egyptians. That means that the only difference between the Hebrews being in captivity and the Egyptians was the voice that they were listening to. The voice that they were listening to is, "You're worthless." The voice that they were listening to is, "You're just a slave." The voice that they're listening to is, "Oh, you're just, this is what you were meant to be. This is what your dad was. Your dad was a slave. Your dad was whatever." See, the thing is that generational curses are very real. And whenever we get into a bondage mentality of, "Oh, this is what my mom did, or this is what my dad did, or this is whatever the case may be," we tend to sometimes take on that identity of a bondage mentality. And see, that's what Egypt or Satan really does really well, is he finds somebody in our family that has some point of influence in our lives to hold in bondage for their entire life, and we look up to that person. And what happens is, if we don't find our own way with God, we take on somebody else's identity, and we say, "I want to be like this person," and we remove God from our lives. We remove God, and we kind of create this generational curse of bondage. And that's what happened here with the Egyptians, and that's what happened here with the Hebrews. And so what he wanted to do, he commanded all the midwives to kill every single newborn male Hebrew at the time of birth. That's brutal. That is brutal. But you'll see that repeated later on down the road whenever Jesus is trying to be birthed. But what I want to point out in Exodus 1 verse 17, it says, "But the midwives feared God." See, the midwives knew and believed in their faith. They had faith that God was going to take care of them, right? They didn't just listen to what the enemy said. So we need to ask ourselves, who are we serving? Are we serving fear, or are we serving God? That's what we need to ask ourselves. It says, "Then Pharaoh commanded all of his people to destroy the baby boys, throwing them into the river." That's Exodus 1:22. That is brutal. A bunch of kids, you're throwing a bunch of newborn babies into a river, watching them drown. That is god-awful and dreadful. But that's what Pharaoh did. He's a pretty brutal guy. See, but Pharaoh operated out of fear. Oh, the enemy will always operate out of fear. Oh man, the enemy will always operate out of fear whenever he is intimidated, and he will do everything in his dadgum power to put you back in the place that you think you're supposed to be in. But let me tell you something. God says, no, you're not supposed to be in bondage. You're above this. You trample on serpents. You trample on the enemy. You trample on anything. It's that God gives us the power to do that. And so let's talk about when Moses was born, okay? Sorry, my voice is getting a little outside. I was sick over the weekend. Let's talk about this. After Moses was born, he was hidden 3 months. He was hidden 3 months by his parents, Jochebed and Amram. And, excuse me, I want to read something to you real quick. I'm actually going to transfer over to Romans real quick, because this is something that's so important. Remember, I read just a second ago, it says that the midwives feared God. What does that mean? The midwives obeyed God. Right? So when we're doing our own thing and we're doing our own will, and when we are doing what we believe is right, let me tell you something that can happen. Now I'm going to point this out as just a prerequisite. God will always, this is something that I heard over the weekend. It was incredible. God will always give a warning before he passes judgment. Maybe the warning just comes from the Word. Maybe it's something divine that's in your life, but God will always give a warning before he passes judgment. He gives an opportunity for us to turn around. He gives an opportunity for us to start making the right decisions. And just as an FYI, if you're just now joining, if you're new, we do a live Bible study every single Tuesday at 7 o'clock. But I want to read this to you, because in Romans chapter 1, verse 28, and it says that, and this is what I want to point out. This is so important. This is following after God and starting to step. You can step into the will of God. It doesn't matter what your past is. Do you understand that we're about to talk about Moses? We're talking about Moses. See, we talk about Moses, this great man in the Bible. Moses was a murderer. Moses didn't make it into the promised land, right? Which, ooh, gosh, I could go into that all day. Anyways, Romans chapter 1, verse 28, it says, even as they did not like to retain their knowledge, retain God in their knowledge. What does that mean? That means that they willingly decided to accept parts of what God wanted them to do, but ignore other parts. That's just in the real version of that. It says, God gave them over to a debased mind, which is a reprobate mind, to do the things that are not fitting. It says, being filled with all unrighteousness, sexual immorality, wickedness, covetousness, maliciousness, full of envy, murder, strife, deceit, and evil-mindedness. They are whisperers, backbiters, haters of God, violent, proud, boasters. My point is that whenever we put our own will, this is not the most popular thing to talk about, right? But whenever we decide to put our own will above what God wants us to do, what happens is we are saying, God, I do not want what you want for me right now. So what we do is we get in this almost like comfort zone of, oh, I'm okay, until we're not okay. What I mean by that is, I don't know about you guys, but I've done this before. I've done this before where I'm like, God, I really don't want to do that. And all of a sudden I'm okay with my decision of not obeying God. And what God says is, I'm not going to force myself on you if you're not willing to obey me. But see, we are going to ultimately have to deal with the consequences of making that choice. Now I'm going to point this out too. At any given time, you can come back to God. You can do it right now. You can do it in your room. You can reach out to God right now and talk to Him. But there comes this point where you notice that all of a sudden you're going to be okay with being less morally correct. My point is that you didn't get you didn't start cussing as a baby. It was learned. You see what I'm saying? These things that we battle with are choices, and we have the ability to overcome those things. See, in James is one of my favorite books, by the way. James says, God says, draw nigh unto me and I will draw nigh unto you. He basically says, you start making steps towards me, and guess what? I'm going to start making steps towards you. You start getting rid of those things out of your life that don't need to be there. I start getting rid of those things out of my life that don't need to be there. He's going to match it. He's going to walk with me, and He's going to help me do that. Man, it's incredible. God is so good. So let's get back to the story. So the midwives, they feared God, and they decided not to listen to Pharaoh. And see, that's what we need to do, because ultimately, I think we spend way too much time listening to the enemy and a lot less time listening to God's promises. And what we really need to be standing on is the promises and not the enemy. So they basically hid him for 3 months. So Moses is born. They hid him for 3 months' time. And then, as you guys probably know, they created this basket, right? This kind of weave basket. It says that it was waterproofed with slime and pitch, which is, in a nutshell, like a goo, if you will. Like a glue. So what happened was she feared God, and she had enough faith in God that she decided to, once again, take that first step. She started weaving the basket, and she started molding this basket, and then she puts her son in this basket and throws it into and puts him in the water, trusting in God that God is going to make a way. And she had no idea whether God was going to make a way or not. But see, here's the thing: is she had the faith. She had the faith. And it says that she hid him each day in the reeds along the river, and his sister Miriam watched the baby Moses from ashore. So basically, they kind of hid him, but in a nutshell. And one day, while on her way to wash herself at the river, Pharaoh's daughter chanced to find the little ark among the reeds. So Pharaoh's daughter ends up finding Moses in the reeds. In long story short, she had the ark brought to her. Whenever she opened it, Moses wept, and Pharaoh's daughter had compassion with the small baby, and basically kind of took him on her own. Took him as her own munchkin. Love the word munchkin. So it says that in Exodus 2 verse 9, it says, and Pharaoh's daughter said unto her, take this child away and nurse it for me, and I will give thee thy wages. And the woman took the child and nursed it. So not only was Moses' parents blessed with Moses being saved, but Pharaoh's daughter also paid them wages, which is just incredible. And it says, and the child grew, and she brought him, Moses, unto the daughter, and he became her son. So Moses grows up. I want you to point this out. I want you to get this. It doesn't matter if you have $500,000 in your bank account. It doesn't matter if you have a nice car. It doesn't matter if you have a nice house. Moses was raised as a wealthy man. He was in Pharaoh's house. He had, for better lack of words, he had the girls. He had the car. He had the house. He had the status. And Moses still ends up seeing a problem with the way that things are run. Now, I'm not saying being wealthy is a bad thing. No, absolutely. If I'm saying that money supersedes our will for God, then absolutely I'm saying that it's something that we need to work on personally. But Moses was raised as a wealthy guy. And it says when Moses was grown, he went out one day among his brethren and saw an Egyptian beating a Hebrew. And he ended up killing that Egyptian, and he hid him in the sand. Now, what's the first thing we want to do whenever we sin? Lots of times we want to hide, just like Moses tried to hide when he did in the sand. Whenever we make a mistake, we should always reach out to God first. This is something that I have seen more oftentimes than not, that in our times of struggle and in our times of frustration, if we have a habit to reaching out to a person before we reach out to God, then what happens is if that person alleviates the pressure, then God becomes less and less important. And then the burden grows more and more on the person that you're venting to. And I'm not saying it's bad to what's the word here? Y'all put the word down there in the comments. Confide. Yes. If I'm not saying it's bad to confide in somebody, absolutely not. But what I am saying is that we should always have the conversation with God first. Always. Because what happens, like I said, is that we can put all this stress on somebody else and all this worry on somebody else. And yeah, we feel relieved because we vented, but now somebody that loves and cares about us has this burden on their heart and they're like, oh my gosh, how do I deal with this? So we try to hide lots of times. Y'all forgive me, I got some congestion. We try to hide. And that's exactly what Moses decided to do. So it says that next day he saw two Hebrews fighting and attempted to separate one of them. And he said, and one of them said, who made thee a prince over the judge of us? Intendest thou kill me as thou killedest the Egyptian? So I want to point this out that unfortunately, I hate this saying, by the way, perception is truth. Moses thought he was doing a good thing by slaying the Egyptian that was hitting his brother. But the reality of it is, in doing that, he lost respect of his own brothers. We need to be careful. Everything that comes out of our mouths, somebody can hear. Every action that we do, somebody can see. And you may be that person like, well, I don't care what other people think, and I don't care about what other people do. And that's fine. I used to be that guy. But let me tell you something. If our goal is to really reach people, and our goal is to really have a ministry, and for really, because that's all of ours, by the way. I'm not just called to do that. I'm just a guy talking on YouTube or Facebook or whatever Facebook. I mean, it's all of our jobs to reach people. My point is that if we are cussing, drinking, partying Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, and then God gives us a word on Sunday for somebody, how serious are they going to take that word? You see my point? My point is that we need to be refining ourselves on a daily basis. We need to be refining our actions and refining our walk with God every single day. It has to be the most important thing in the world. We have to be careful about what comes out of our mouth. We have to be careful about what our actions are, because if you're in this walk with God with me and you're really trying to get rid of those distractions, then you will start to eliminate the things that you know you struggle with, and then God will illuminate the things that you don't know you struggle with. So let's keep on going. So Moses kills this man.